when questions are asked, whether it's direct, we should just kind of slide over here. Okay. So first question that came from the chat is for you, Brian. Back when the SOP was announced, talk a little bit about how the costs were absorbed, how how the initial share price was created, and what the total cost impact was for the employees, please.
Everything was, the entire business-wise was put into a trust that's, that we have a group, an outside group that oversees that group. And then every year an evaluation is done, or valuation is done with the everything that was put into trust was actually done as a loan that we pay back, the employees pay back so much a month until that's paid off. It's a 10-year program. We're 3 years into this, and we're probably about 7 years into as far as what we pay back to the total debt. And then once that debt's paid off, then everything within Astro is owned by all the employees. At what cost did it come to the employees? Absolutely nothing. There was nothing was taken away. We still have the OEM, we still have the OEM bonus payout as long as again, as long as you continue to make money. We have a 401k. So no benefits were taken away from any employees, and there was absolutely no cost to any employee to be part of it. It's just, you're hired at Astro, you are part of the ESOP program. And it's a 7-year vested interest. So after 7 years, you're fully vested.
You spoke to the retention, so I'm assuming once the initial announcement came out, must have been well received.
Very much so. And that's another thing that's unique about Astro is that we have a relatively low turnover rate for employees. Being in business since 1984, 37 years, we still have the very first employee hired by the four original owners of Astro is still there. He's retiring in another month, but he's still there. So that part of it never seemed to be a problem. This just strengthened that.
Next question is for Michael. In looking for the next best person, how do you solve the internal existing person if they don't meet that profile that you developed?
Yeah, good question. I think we'd go about it a couple of ways. Our last option is to partner with the person who's there, because usually there's another role we can find for that person. But I think it's really pretty straightforward. We're just talking to the people and saying, here's what we need, here's what we think you can fit. And as we look out to the future, we see you more in this role than that role. And if that role is not satisfactory to that person, then they tend to just self-select out. So we haven't had a whole lot of conflict around that, but it's really just open communication. It's another version, I guess, of OBM, really. It's just being open and honest with people about where you're going, what you need, and then, try to map that out. We've been at this a while, so in the beginning, that'll probably happen more than it happens over time. But over time, the people that you have in the spots are people that you thought about and you're coming along. So your batting average tends to go up over time.
That actually leads me to a follow-up question. Were you there from the beginning when this plan started getting put in place? And if you were, looking at those critical roles first and then expanding out, talk to the time frame.
Sure.
A company of your size would have done.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think it was being done informally well before I got there. People were just instinctively, or our generation two built the business to a certain sort of constantly thinking, oh, here are these new opportunities, and how are we going to fill them? And it sort of started on that path. I came from a public company before I joined Araten, and so I had seen processes at a different level of scale. And so when I joined, part of what I started doing with our group is in our family really saying, let's professionalize this in a more systematic way. We're super systemized about how we make stuff, right? Next 2001, everything's got a process. But we don't have a process for this, why don't we? And they sort of laughed after we were like, oh yeah, well, first they said they had a process, but then we had that discussion. Then once we realized that it was an informal process, there's always a process, it's just how formal or informal. So I think really over the last 15 years I've been there, that's part of what we've become part of the next generation of what we're doing is putting a process to that's what makes us competitive and more efficient.
And I think your suggestion was really good. You don't have this set up, start with the critical roles, because it can seem overwhelming if you're trying to create a very slow.
I agree. I'll take a less controversial thing or less emotional thing, which was what we started with marketing in a different way with actually Thomas. And if all this stuff you can do digitally, what is it? And we finally said, all right, what's the simplest thing we can start with? It was pay-per-click ads on Google. And we started with literally a $50 a month budget on Google. And so you're right, it's the first step, right? Just start, learn, because there one person, like who's my foreman that I just got to make sure, who's another easy one is who's retiring in the next 5 years, and then which of those people are critical and start there. So, I agree. Together.
Especially in manufacturing, so much of the workforce retired.
Yes.
5 years later, too long.
Or 3, right? Yeah. You look at who's on the line for retirement over the next 2 years. And, I think that's a great place to start.
Mark?
I want to commend both of you on how well you've been able to deal with two critical issues in manufacturing. And this is going back 5 years. At one of the first seminars that I attended was retaining employees and succession planning. And you have two different approaches, and it seems like very successful in terms of what you've been able to do. And it all comes down to both of you empowering your employees seems like the common denominator. The question I have for Michael is when you look at your strategic plan and you're looking out 5 years, and then you have your 80-20 rule in terms of I'm focusing 80% of my energy on the 80% of the workforce or whatever. Does that strategic plan sort of take you away from that? Is there a tug and pull on that? Because maybe your strategic plan is going away from your core business, but you're still trying to maintain that. How do you sort of deal with
Yeah,
those
that's
two?
one of my favorite words. My wife will hear me say it all the time, is balance. And it's finding that balance. So you're planning for the long term, you're dealing with the short term. There is no long term without a short term. So what's happening on a quarterly and annual basis? Is it mapping out what you think is going to be happening in the future? And you have to be humble enough to know that you're going to be wrong. And how long are you going to be? Are you willing to change the fast change? And that's part of it. So, we may think, and we have thought, we thought about different segments. We thought we were doing a ton of government business. That was one of our plans a while ago. And there were a lot of reasons to do it, Made in America and all that stuff. And we just couldn't get it going in the way we wanted. So we left that part of our long-term plan and focused more on the construction industry, which is one of our other areas. We sort of identified 3 areas. And we were having a lot of success there. So we changed the focus, therefore changed what we were doing with our employees to get more skilled in that particular segment. So it's always that balance. And so we're looking at, because we're sort of doing this rolling cycles, we're looking 4 years out, we're seeing how we're doing, we're measuring that against what we think we're going to be, and then making adjustments along the way. One of my favorite analogies to long-term planning is sending a rocket to the moon. The rocket to the moon was only actually on the course 4% of the time. A lot of course corrections along the way. It got there. If you look from the start to the end, it looked perfect. But if you talk to the engineers there, it was off course most of the time, having to get it in. So, and having watched William Shatner yesterday, they got a lot better, right? The rocket landed by itself. So there's a lot of course correcting that needs to happen, and that's just part of the balance. And I think tying into your earlier comment, I think the combination of the commonality of both of us really is that about the feeling of ownership. It could be actual ownership, or it could be part of the process and part of the process. process, or both of those things can work. Obviously, most companies are not ESOPs, so it's creating that environment that you feel like you're part of the future. And there are certainly usually, I'm not saying there's not money involved, there's going to be probably bonus structures and all of the rest of the things as well. But it's that I think it's the communication achieves a lot of the goals that an ESOP also achieves. I think that it's a fascinating way to look at it. But that's very much what to add.
No, I think we did it all. A follow-up question I would have on that is, you both spoke a lot about culture. And the importance of, brings up to say, having ownership, whether it's formal or, perceived pride in your company. Speak to that as far as, please, new employees coming in, your existing employees kind of police themselves as far as enforcing that culture. Just be interested in you guys.
I think that I don't know how we call it policing, but for us, it's almost a mentoring program. We don't just hire somebody and they come in and they're just not thrown to the wolves. And because of that, that mentoring program, they're given an opportunity to work side by side with our veteran people and learn from them on how our culture is built. And it's just a natural evolution with all of our new employees that way. Just because they're just not thrown in and say, there's your machine, go to it.
I agree with that. I also think there's a simple thing that happens in a place. We're in a really nice room here today. The building's great, and I think the sense of place. Like I noticed your improvement video, how clean the shop looked, and we're clean freaks at our place too. And I think that's the sense of pride starts to walk into the place. Well, no, people care about this place. It's freshly painted. The machines are up to date. The people are, so it starts with on the way in. The parking lot looks right, like everything, so it looks organized and clean, and so it creates right away an impression that these people must care about themselves here because they've created an environment where you can actually just focus on what you're doing and not tripping over, lubricants and wires. And so it's just as simple as that. I think it helps set the tone.
And I would agree with that. I mean, it goes right down to, I always told the story when I first started at Astro. My very first day, back then, he's one of our sales, he's our government sales manager now. He actually followed me back home, dropped my vehicle off, and then brought me back in my new car. And he told me, he said, you will never, ever hear one complaint. Let me back up. Along with the car, we got a car wash cart. He said, you will never, ever hear a complaint about how high our car wash bill is every month. So it goes all the way to every one of our vehicles that's on the road. Probably our biggest billboard is all our trucks that are on the road. We get more compliments from people saying, I saw your truck. So the culture goes down that far.
Okay. This question is for Brian. With having the OBM system, do you or how do you keep employee salaries private from others?
And that is in the OBM program, that is the one thing that is not disclosed, our employee salaries. Now, you'll see a top line on the metrics saying what the combined payout is for everybody's weekly wages, but it's not broken down individually. That's kept private.
This question came in from the chat, so just make sure I understand it correctly. please discuss how you determine the resource pressure point critical versus positions that are part of the strategic plan.
Okay, so, yeah, I think I understand. How do you decide what's most important? My quick answer to that is, what drives the profitable revenue from the business? I always start with, what are we selling that makes us the most money? Then from there, what is that, who's involved in that process? Is it a particular product line, is it a particular customer, is it a particular segment? What is it? And so, because nothing else happens if we're not, sales doesn't happen. Right, so I always start with sales first, and then use that revenue generation to inform what is it that I have to focus on to get those sales to happen. So in your case, it might be that my distribution center, my warehousing screwed up, and if I had racking and barcoding and all that, I could get out 20% more stuff. Maybe that's the issue. Maybe it's that my ERP system, not all the modules are turned on, and I can't tell where my inventory levels are properly. Maybe it's that my tool makers aren't up on the latest technology. So I'm getting requests for projects that I can't do. So it's understanding where your sales are coming from, to me, is the most important thing. And then the rest flows from that, because then once you understand that, you understand the people are driving that, then those are, in my mind, the most important people. I'm not talking about salespeople in particular, I'm talking about people actually making the stuff happen that allows you to get product out there.
So through this whole pandemic, and this is probably to both of you, what have you learned about your company that you really didn't know before the pandemic and sort of brought it to light in terms of what, I'm not saying the silver lining in it, but what came out of that that sort of changed the way you thought about things going forward and maybe some of your succession planning as well as just your business?
I think for me, the biggest lesson was we sent everybody home who could be home, because it didn't have to be on a working machine. We were deemed an essential business by the governor's order of where either the plastics was, but we sent everybody home we could, right? We sent 40% of the workforce home. And within 10 days, it was as though they were more productive than they were arguably when they were in the office. Everybody stepped up, everybody communicated more, everybody was able to, our IT group was like two guys, was able to set everybody up and it worked, we were able to communicate with customers. So I think for me, that broadened out where we can get talent from, because the challenge is that they all have to be right here in the factory. And so it's that balance of the ability to see talent in other parts of the country and have some people potentially remote all the time. And it allowed us to give more flexibility to our workforce. So we're still only going for those office people in the office 3 days a week. We think that may be the way it goes forever. They're happier, less commuting, they're productive, they're still in enough that we have interactions on a daily basis when necessary. So I think we found that, if you're working in balance of innovation and flexibility. So for me, those have been the biggest lessons. I think the other big lesson is diversity of end markets is important. Because that had been one of our strategic objectives, and we weren't sure if we were in the right markets. And the pandemic hit, 40% of our customers were shut down. Within 2 months, we were doing more business we were doing pre-pandemic because of some of our other segments that went up. But there's the diversity more. So I think diversity of end markets and flexibility of workforce are my two big lessons.
We're a little bit different in that we didn't have to have anybody go remote. We were also deemed an essential business because of all the diverse types of business that we do, both on the commercial side and on the government side. And there was really never any discussion from day one about, is there anybody that can work remote? I think everybody that is there from management on down is so hands-on with the company that it would be very difficult to do. Probably the biggest impact that it had is how we do sales, and I'm probably the biggest one that affected is that my time on the road has almost gone away. And it's for me personally, it's been a challenge. But you know, for me being behind the desk 90% of the time versus 30% of the time, it's changed the way that we do business. It really hasn't slowed us down. So there is definitely, we see the pluses and minuses from it. But we will, there's the way that we do business, the remote part of it just, it doesn't work for us.
This question was directed to Michael, but I think you could both probably speak to this. The point of empowering employees, how do you evaluate certain employees' dedication to the company versus it's just a job to them when you're searching for those future leaders and kind of building that bench?
With us, it started with the OBM program. We found out very early on with some of the employees that didn't grasp the whole concept. Where it's important to know where your money's going. And we had a couple of employees that just said, you know what? Yeah, it's great. We pay out a bonus twice a year. I'm just going to ride the coattails and reap the benefits. It wasn't management that drove them out. It was the people in the workforce that was working side by side with them. That's how it works for us.
Yeah, I would say for us, there's a certain level that the culture as it gets developed, people like to be with people that sort of think like them generally, and so that what happens. I think it reminds me of an old Supreme Court case about pornography, which is you know when you see it. And if you communicate a lot as owners and managers in middle market business, they can have that advantage where you don't have thousands of people spread across the world, so you get to know the people that you're working with. And so it is hard to fake attitude, positive attitude, and looking for more responsibility and asking about the future. It's just hard to fake that. So one of the advantages of having a middle market business is that you get to know your people, and so you know over time which people are motivated and which people are just sort of, it's a job to them and they're running out the door and they don't want to, they're just not focused on growth in the way we're focused on.
So follow-up question that you just spoke about, pandemic and now, embracing innovation and technology, and as our workplaces are, say with us, being spread out all over the country, is that hard to manage in your opinion, or does that still shine through? Even if you're not side by side.
I think it's there's trade-offs. I think that when we talk about that, there's trade-offs to everything, and I think that the advantage of the technology is that it allows you to communicate all the time. The disadvantage is that you have to be more proactive because you're not walking around the hallways, and so you have to plan those communications. So if you set up a secretarial process to communicate with your people and push it through the organization, then you can approximate that. But I do think that we're still, people, and until we evolve into floating heads, that there is some human interaction that's still going to be necessary. What level that is going to depend on the organization and the kind of work you're in and what you're doing. And because not every look, we have one location or two locations in a mile of each other. If you're lucky enough to have 7 locations around the country or 25, then you just have to deal with that. I mean, and obviously many successful companies do that. So I don't think you have to all be in one place for it to work. Is my point. But if there's advantages to being in one place.
I have 2 questions, and I'll ask them at the same time. So if you want to ignore one, you can. And when I ask the question, you'll realize that. So my first question is your firm hiring, or has it been recently? And how's that going? Because there seems to be less people available to work. The second question is, there are certain, and I don't understand it exactly, but it seems to be that there are certain vaccine mandates, either pending or soon to be pending for firms. I know one of these is 122, I think the other one's just under 100 employees, but how is your company addressing those mandates? So they're my two questions. You can do with them as you please.
So on the OSHA thing, which is going to be for all people who have more than 100 employees, we gave our employees a heads up that we're going to enforce it. That we're saying, we incentivize everybody to get vaccinated with $100 gift card things. We brought in on-site shots. We did as much as we could, and we got 104 out of our 122 people vaccinated so far. So we're down to the holdouts, right? That's where we're down to pretty much. So we're trying to make it on that. I believe in the, in the full state. I wish we were all vaccinated. I think it's hard as a middle market business sometimes. Everybody's so critical to mandate it and risk them losing, which is, a little easier for someone like United Airlines that lost 600 people, but they lost 600 people out of 60,000. And they'll make up that 1% relatively quickly. If we lose those 17 people, we potentially are out of business. So although I'd love to take that stance, I'm actually happy OSHA's going to make them get tested every week. We make them wear masks because we're allowed to do that, so they're not vaccinated. So at least we try to make it uncomfortable for people who aren't vaccinated and give rewards to people who are. That's sort of our view of that. We're also going to be charging them more for health insurance if they're not vaccinated, on their deductibles. So we're nudging people in the direction of being vaccinated. On the hiring, yes, we're hiring. We've been hiring through the pandemic. We hired through the pandemic. It is definitely a little bit harder to find people than it was, 2 years ago. I think a lot of that is people have different, it's compounded. Manufacturing is tough anyway, and it's compounded by people being scared of coming to work or all the other childcare issues and everything else that's going on. So, but yes, we've hired. We continue to hire, and that's where we are. So we're looking forward to the OSHA mandate. We think that people having to pay for their own tests every week is going to cause them to take the shot. That's what we think.
As far as Astro goes, we haven't been quite as creative as Michael's company has been with some great ideas that I'm going to take. Okay. But we have a safety manager that is full time. That's all he does is stay on top of all this. We currently we do have 120 employees, but we have not instituted a mandate that anybody that's not vaccinated must get vaccinated. Although a company newsletter just went out a week ago from the president of the company saying that it's being watched closely and it could change their report. So, understanding everybody's personal beliefs, religious beliefs, whatever it might be. As far as the hiring, yes, we're always hiring. I should say always, almost always hiring. It is challenging. We have our own internal apprenticeship program that we started a few years ago for machinists, and we'll pull a person if they've got the right attitude and what we feel is the right work ethic with no experience. We'll pull them off the street and actually train them. We just had another one that started on Monday.
And how long is your apprenticeship?
Well, a lot of it's dependent on the person itself. It's not a formal program in that you're going to say a night school for 2 nights a week for 4 years, like I did when I started my apprenticeship a long time ago. And then when you finished your 4 years of theory and you had your 2,000 hours, whatever that number was, you got your certificate. All of our theory training was all done online. So that's the pace of that is up to each individual person. And we tried to keep that moving along with, they rotate everywhere through the shop, with the exception of maybe a machinist may not spend a lot of time in the weld shop learning how to weld. But they get to see all aspects of the company, which is really beneficial because we're a custom machine builder since day one. So if a machinist doesn't understand why does it have to be made such a close tolerance, when he hits the assembly floor and sees the parts that he used to make don't fit. Light bulb goes off. So, yeah, the hiring process is continuous. The biggest challenge, and probably no different from you, is night shift. If we could hire 8 or 10 more people, just for night shift, we would do it in a heartbeat.
Follow-up question for you, Brian. In regards to retention, you spoke of your apprenticeship program. Do you see better success rates for those that come through the apprentice program versus those that come with skill and background they've already received outside of the organization? Can you correlate that at all?
I think it's a trade-off. We're always looking. It's harder to find the experienced guy that's looking for a job because they're just not moving.
Yeah, you don't want to know.
Years ago, it used to be you were a machinist or a tool and die maker. There was nothing to move from shop to shop to shop. You just don't see that anymore. The guys that are going through the apprenticeship, I think what advantage they may have in the long run is they're getting to see and getting hands-on with every aspect within the shop itself. Or if you hire somebody that's got experience, say he's an experienced milling machine operator, that's where he's at. Where if our apprentices, they get a well-rounded education through their apprenticeship that when they're done, where they thought they were going to be, or when they first started the apprenticeship, may not be where they end up, or they can be moved around as needed.
That probably also helps with building their development plan because they saw firsthand all aspects of the business, so they would have some more input into the areas that they want to eventually get to.
I've got a question, circling back to communication. I'm challenged by figuring out how to best communicate in a hybrid setting. Is that something that you have developed some technical approach to figuring out how to create? Yeah, you can go out there, but how do we create that togetherness part?
Yeah,
We do that.
we do two things. We do one-to-one, so I do one-to-ones with my direct reports, either online or in person, mostly online once a week. Then I have them do their one-to-ones with their direct reports once a week. We have a senior team meeting every other week that could be virtual or in person. And then we'll have department once a week meet virtually or in person. So there's set touch points across the organization so that the information flow is happening. And then in the background, something on top of that happens that's significant, then we'll use our intranet to send out a message internally as a written thing. But which has happened more than I expected because of all the health changes. So if we want updates on the health front, that's how we do it. So we set up a communication process to set
Do you have any, is there a way how to communicate that to, for instance, like a common screensaver that pops up for everyone? Is there something like that you might have?
I mean, there are different tools.
Yeah.
We use either Zoom or GoToMeeting for those things. That's what we're doing. And then we're using HubSpot as our communication both externally and internally.
Gotcha.
So if we have to push a message, either by text message or by email, we can do it that way.
How do you have fun? How do you have fun together? No, I mean, I'm really,
Yeah.
I used to work for an organization where we had, my goodness, I need more weight, but it's like there was like some food event or something like happening all the time, and then you're like, it's like gone, right? How do you have fun?
That's a good one. I mean, we're having fun every day because we're creating great stuff. But no, I know you're talking about those events. I think that the fun part, that kind of fun, interactive fun, has been put on hold for us since the pandemic has begun. We've done some stuff on Zoom where we talk to each other, and but we haven't done any of the Yeah, I've done some virtual charity events where they mail the food home and they go online together.
Yeah.
Made drinks together. We haven't done that. We didn't, I think it's just not the same, and we feel like we'll just wait until we can actually get together and do it. There you go. See you later.
Speaking of which.
Send you a virtual beer.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Again, Michael, Brian, my warmest appreciation, thank you very much. You both did an excellent job. Those of you that are joining us virtually, I hate to say it, but unfortunately, you're not going to be enjoying the rest of the festivities, but thank you for tuning in. Hopefully next time we will be able to see you in person. Again, another thank you to Lisa and Thomas Registry in particular for being a premier sponsor for this event. Again, we wouldn't have been able to do it without you, so thank you very much.
My pleasure.